Thank you so much. And I'm feeling like a villain sitting here, stopping you from your lunch. But trust me, it's a very, close to heart conversation, which I would like to begin with. I'm CHRO for Metropolis, and we were in the forefront during the pandemic. And the series of conversation which has been happening since morning is talking about how technology has become an enabler. But trust me, when the pandemic hit, it was standstill. And we had to use human-centric approach to ensure that people on the ground are there to serve the community. In our industry, which is diagnostics, which is across all companies which are there, people actually had to work with patients who were COVID infected. They had to come to the lab, not a single day they were working from home. They had to touch the samples themselves. That required a lot of counseling, lot of human-centric conversations with them to ensure that they are there on the job. So no man, material, machine would have done it. Only these kind of human-centric conversation would have achieved it. So I would like to, thank all the healthcare sector people who have really worked during this period to ensure that we are here sitting, again having, face-to-face conversation. And that's a very beautiful and delight to see people have that social connection with people. It is very important, yeah? So without wasting much time, I would like to, people have been introduced, I guess. So the topic for today is high-tech to human tech, becoming empathetic leader. And we have a diverse set of people sitting here who will be, answering series of questions for us. So the first question I would like to give to Manish. Manish, what is empathetic leader? Mahesh, yeah, sorry. Why empathy emerges as a leading skill in the C-suite?
Yeah, hi. Good afternoon, everyone. And I do agree with Ishita that, just before lunch, it could be very difficult to digest. So I'll try and relate to a couple of stories which are very close to my heart on empathy and empathetic leadership. I'm sure most of you in this space would recollect a very powerful story, and someone was talking about empathy 13 years ago in the last panel. And here was a story which was coming from all the way from 1974. Any guesses on the story of Sudha Murthy with J.R.D. Tata? Where J.R.D. Tata was waiting for her husband to arrive because it was late in the night, and she was a young engineer at Telco. And her husband was late, and J.R.D. was around, and he found the only woman there waiting, and it was a little dark. And he stayed on. And she felt very uncomfortable that the chairman of the group was waiting for her husband to arrive. So I think, and thereafter, of course, wishing her, there was ample stories around how she reached into Telco, having written to JRD himself when they had advertised ladies need not apply kind of a story of those times. So I think it's almost 50 years, Ishita. 49, 48, whatever. But I think that's a very, very powerful story which is very close to our heart even today. And I think that defines what empathetic leadership could be. Closer home, I come from Rustomjee. Rustomjee is into real estate in Mumbai. And I think our business, a lot is driven through empathy and trust. And when I look at stories around in our office, I think there is ample to learn from. So one of our very first few projects which we delivered in Dahisar in Mumbai, and one of the days our chairman was around there, and the society members bumped into him and they said, Baman bhai, you have delivered one of the best projects, but you know what? There is an elevator in it which is giving us a lot of problem. Now elevator is not something which the developers manufacture. Elevator is something which is outsourced. And Mr. Baman Irani, our chairman, actually went out of his way and he immediately said, you don't worry about it, we'll replace it free of cost. Now, I know I come from North, and in a society where I live, we all paid through our nose for replacing an elevator in a society which you are maintaining. The society is maintaining for the last decade. So I think there will be ample stories from leaders, business leaders, where you don't keep profits in your mind all the time. You just be empathetic to that problem. And then closer in, for all the HR folks, I still remember early days of me being in HR. I had just come in from business. And there is this appraisal period which happens. And we have these lovely women who go for maternity. And what does happen to their performance rating in that year? And classically, the leader would say, she wasn't there for about 7-8 months. And they will fall in that bracket of the average performer, despite being a rock star otherwise. And we ended up publishing all those standard letters. And this one woman, very sweetly, she came to me and she said, Mahesh, why am I being given this average performer letter? And I think we created a change. I said, I fully agree with you. I think this one calls for a very special letter. It cannot be a formatted one. So we really created that year onwards a letter for all the women who had gone, and we said, and that letter did not read about performance, it read about motherhood. That such a beautiful journey motherhood is, that it cannot be driven by just a formatted performance appraisal letter, which says, you are rated 3, you are rated, meets expectations, etc., etc. On the contrary, it talked about how special you are, that, you went through this journey of motherhood, and we are really happy with you. So I think for me, empathetic leadership is driven from most of such instances. One last one quickly I'd like to share. And I think we have recently followed, as an organization, we are headed to a public event soon. We have filed our DRHP. And we did also our maiden ESOP scheme. And I think we took as an example a brick and mortar company giving ESOPs right up to not only the, from the top to the bottom, right up to the office boys, but also to all the outsourced employees who work for you. So I think these are defining moments for me, which is where I feel that you could for a minute park the tech and the jazz in the room and talk about empathetic
Absolutely.
leadership.
It is more of the emotional connect than,
Absolutely.
the technology sometimes tries to create a barrier, which we human are actually used to. So Sai, for you, in this era of accelerated transformation, how do leaders find a sweet spot between automation and human interaction?
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon to all of you. My name is Sai Suryanarayan. I am responsible to lead the people function for Fincare Small Finance Bank based at Bangalore. I guess empathy is a very important aspect of leadership, and every leader must demonstrate because it helps the leader to know the thoughts, emotions, and feelings of the team members. I'm sure emotional intelligence stems from here, but agree with Mahesh completely that there's an angle of trust. If you don't trust your team members or your team members don't trust you, you're at most a manager and not a leader. On the tech part, how do we put this as a correlation between? I think without automation or tech, you really can't have the human interactions flow freely, irrespective of how many members you have on the deck. Most important is to look for approaches which are beyond conventional approaches that we follow, whether it is the onboarding, the induction that we do for our new people, or the tech-enabled the learning platforms. I'm sure most organizations use the training platform. At Fincare, we use iExcel, that's the learning platform, and we encourage everybody to use that in a big way. As leaders, it's important for us to drive home the point that tech leverage must happen in a big way. The tagline for our organization is wish more, get more. So we would also be going for the IPO in the JFM quarter next year. And we are at an advanced stage. We have done the documentation, etc. So wishing more, getting more. And we also, as a part of larger narrative, tell our staff that, the journey of institution building is full of infinite possibilities. So we need to therefore use tech in a big way and excite all the leaders to inspire the team members below.
So I would just like to build on what Sai said, that technology definitely will free up our mind space in terms of the transactional work which we are required to do, and then make us more available on the ground to understand the pulse and the feelings of people down there, to have a conversation. And empathetic, when we are talking about, it's all about understanding where it pains, getting into the shoe of a person, the frontline guys, to understand what is his needs. And the more we listen, the more we are closer to the ground, we are able to solve all the business problems. Thank you, Sai, for this. Yeah, so successful adoption of automation is making the workplace more digital. So with that, Jacob, next question is for you. HR is getting automated very rapidly, and humanizing tech to to provide superior experience to the workforce is the priority. What are your thoughts around it?
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. See, if you look at technology today, I mean, most companies are adopting technology in a big way, especially the HR departments to the HRMS system. But what they fail to understand is, HR and technology should be enablers. It should be part of the employee experience, making life a little simpler for the employee in terms of their usual mundane administrative tasks. All of that from an employee perspective, it's like, how do I simplify processes? What can I put on the, what can I put up on technology so that life becomes easier within the organization, whether it's approvals, whether it is, your own personal information getting updated, whether it's for your PMS, etc. But more importantly, what is key is that the human element also has to be a critical element in this process. So if you look at, earlier, the best example that I heard was, today when you apply for leave, people just go there, apply for leave, 2 days, personal leave, EL, etc., over approved, etc. Earlier, there used to be some sort of a dialogue between the manager and his teammate. Okay, oh, you're going on leave, you're going on a holiday, is everything okay? Are you okay? Today, that element of that is, to a large extent is missing. So I think when you look at, I think some of the earlier panels also alluded to the fact that there is an emotional connect which is there. And we as human beings need that social, that psychological fabric, which will also help us be better, give better results in the organization. So one example that I can give you is, prior to this, I've spent about more than a decade in healthcare. And this was during the COVID time. And when I was an expat and I was based in Singapore, Kuala Lumpur. So we had this case in the interiors of Indonesia in one of our hospitals, in the interiors of Indonesia in a place called Semarang, where a patient came when the patient came in was non-COVID. The patient unfortunately lost his life. When the patient lost his life, they found out that the patient had COVID, and the nurses who were treating the patient were all COVID positive. And the hospital kind of came to a standstill at that point. No one knew what to do, because this was at the beginning of the beginning of when COVID was taking place in that part of Southeast Asia. So I think the CEO called all of us, and we were put on a crack team. A special aircraft was arranged, including me, and we had to fly into Semarang and take care of what was happening in the hospital. So there was fear, there was chaos, not knowing what to do, how do you isolate other patients, and so it was a complete protocol as far as COVID was concerned to take care. And unfortunately, this patient was not a patient who was living in Semarang in Indonesia. This was a patient who flew in from Kuala Lumpur for some reason and had to be admitted in Indonesia and died in Indonesia. So you can imagine the complications. So what I'm trying to say is that how much will technology be able to provide answers to a situation like this? Very difficult. So you have to have that human element. Somebody has to stick their neck out, and somebody has to make that difference in bringing the elements. Technology can answer some of these elements, but if you're going to bring everything together, it becomes very difficult only if you have the proper human interaction, and more than that, sticking your neck out and leading people, helping them make decisions which make a difference. Finally, we solved that issue, but it required some of 2 or 3 of a crack member team which had to fly in from Singapore, make this happen, and then console the family, bring the family, the body had to be taken to Kuala Lumpur. And so there were so many other elements which had to be tied up. But so on the same note, technology can only do so much, and you have to have a fine balance between technology and human interaction. One more example I'll take, when you look at most of our companies today post-COVID are looking at expansion. When you're looking at expansion, one of the key things technology must provide you today is with who are the people who can take up roles in that new, whether you're opening a new facility. Like for us, we're opening a lot of new retail stores. So we use a lot of predictive analysis to say that who are the people who are best equipped to move from current location to the new store. So that is when technology helps you as far as making decision is concerned. But issues such as why are you moving, what kind of a role, how is it going to help you in your career, etc., can only happen to human interaction and communicating to these employees that this is what will happen, this is what is there for the good of the organization and for the good of you. And that's what makes a difference as far as the balance between technology and human interaction.
This morning, I think Dallas mentioned that there's a McKinsey report which said, 60% of the occupation has at least 30% of the job that can be automated. That doesn't mean that, we should be scared and that these jobs will not exist. And a lot of people have put emphasis during the day on learning and evolving, being relevant to the context. So it doesn't mean that, HR folks should get scared that everything will get automated and human intervention will not be required and these roles will become redundant. But definitely there will be a lot of challenges. So tell me, what kind of challenges are you foreseeing in balancing this, the tech and the human-centric approach?
I guess it will be a hybrid model in terms of, whatever challenges come up, in terms of getting the right set of people to work. I think a very important point which you touched upon is the skill set of the people. I remember an example of a movie roughly about 20 years back, the late Robert Williams, Patch Adams. I'm not sure how many of you have watched. The movie is about, inspiring hope, how you bring joy and laughter into the lives of people. So frankly, if we look at empathy as a theme in a big way, we look at, what are the challenges in terms of tech. I feel we should do away with, as leaders, some of the routine operational tasks that we do. There are two important aspects, I feel, which is very important as leaders. One is on the strategizing, and second is in terms of decision making. Now, decisioning in terms of people, I'm sure we all do it on a regular basis in terms of, how do we treat performers differently? How do we look at those high ports, etc.? How do we look at maybe helping the bottom 10 or the average or below average performers? I think that's where we as HR would play a very, very important role to build an institution that will stand forever.
Yeah, thanks. Jacob, you want to add something?
See, if you look at the retail sector, especially the gems and jewelry sector, the business models are changing rapidly. Now, if you look at, most of the retailers are looking at their strategy in terms of as an omni-channel strategy. So when you're looking at omni-channel strategy, one of the key things that the salesperson within the store needs to understand is he's no more a custodian of sales for that particular store. He's now a custodian of the products of the entire company. So technology is bringing about a rapid change, not only in terms of the business model of the organization, but also in terms of the business mental model of the people who are going to be using that technology. So now, if there are no products available in that store, he's able to show the customer, yes, it's not available in our store. These are our plethora of products that we have across the organization. We should be able to customize it and deliver it to you at your residence. So this is happening. I think COVID brought about this big change in the change of business model. Even during COVID, when the shops were not open, I think people could go on and ask for a demo in their house, provided all the protocols were followed. So these were the kind of things which were happening. But in all of this, what is key is, how do you ensure that you're able to communicate the right messaging to the employee? One, how are you able to train and make them see the larger picture than just saying that it's just a business model change, this is what will happen. So you really have to make them understand that what is it that they're going to be thinking, what is it that they're going to be doing. And the best example is, many of you would have heard of Cleveland Clinic in the US. So Cleveland Clinic has they have on their website, they have something known as a second opinion. So basically, whether you are sitting anywhere wherever you are in any part of the world, you can log on to this thing called second opinion and get an opinion for your medical issue. And then they will do the needful through technology, even airlift you from location A to location B, wherever you are in which part of the world, get you treated. And then after you're treated, you can go to any other part of the world. And still, through technology, you can be connected with your doctor and you can still get treatment. So I think, many businesses are really changing their models to see what is it, how can technology come in, but with that human element, as I said earlier, and more importantly, the right messaging, the right training, and for everybody to see what is it that they're contributing to the larger picture of the organization.
Thanks. And I think I would like to add another softer aspect to it, which is the most important one, like with technology coming in, a lot of, and you see the new generation also, and in fact, you see the audience sitting here. No one is away from their phones, okay? So people are so glued to technology, and it is actually alienating a lot of people from being present at the moment. And this eventually, I am sure many of us would have observed a lot of mental health issues which are coming up in this generation and even now in that context. And most of it is happening because we are so much away and alienated from human being, human touch. And these softer issues will become very rampant if we are not course correcting. Everything becoming technology, screen all the time, mobile all the time. even the student generation, I mean, I have young children at home, and it's very difficult to move them away from the screen. And this definitely will lead to a bigger issue, which is mental health issue and well-being issue. And we need to be really focused on how much of it technology should be carefully used where it is required. And I'm sure all of you, again, I would like to say that all of you being present here for the social interaction itself, the smiling faces, the kind of party you guys had last evening, the photographs which were being shared in the group is actually saying that we are still very much emotionally hungry. We need emotional connect. We need human connect. With that, I would like to, open the forum for all of you to ask.
I wanted to add one point to that, Ishita. I think very rightly said, and since there are a lot of HR folks and many a time your technology partners go on suggesting a lot of things. So as COVID struck us, so our CIO came up with this, that why don't we use desk time as an application, to relate to how much people have been working and productivity, etc. So I honestly had to put my foot down. And I said, no, why do you want to really measure that? I mean, go to the outcomes and don't go into measuring in terms of how much time people spend on the screen. And I think you rightly said that we don't need to be, being mindful of your screen time is definitely, most of your fitness apps also keep on throwing it back to you in terms of how much you were on the screen. But come to think of it, and most places where I go to, I end up speaking this one thing, because in one of our flagship projects, everything is very digital. You are going to shave, and on the mirror you click. You can start YouTube right on the mirror, and you're in the washroom. You can almost Google and you can see everything around. But then I always tell them that it's like while our mirrors have gone digital, but we would love to stay human. So I think staying human and empathetic there is also equally important. Sorry. Over to you. You had, I think, thrown it open to the audience. Yeah.
I think we changed the entire context from tech to human that we have managed to do. That's why there's full silence.
Yeah, I think very importantly, Mahesh, you touched upon. When, for example, we would want to recognize or appreciate any of our team members, however much tech platforms we use, I think it's a good gesture to walk up and appreciate in person rather than use any other tools to use those aspects. And I would feel that, if we look at impact in a big way, how do we really impact the staff who work with us? So maybe speed plus scale plus tech equals impact. So that's the rule of the game. I think speed is very important and tech is equally important. Clubbed together leads to a higher impact to the staff.
Ishita, question.
Very, very simple question. Can empathy be taught to leaders? Can empathy be taught to leaders? If yes, how?
If you'd like to take that?
So good one. That's a tough one, in fact. Can empathy be taught to leaders? See, in my understanding, I think it can be. And the question is how? The question is that so for example, if I were to ask you, how do you train people on team building? What do you do to them? You take them to an offsite, run them through experiential learning. You do, activities like a human ski and stuff like that. And when they fall, when they are not supporting the team and the whole group falls, or you do something like a blindfolded activity or something, you want people to experience it. And what is the belief we have? That when you experience it yourself, you learn. I think there are ample ways of demonstrating empathy right from the top that you will end up learning. I'll give you another example. For probably donkey's years, we were always of the opinion that, if there's a training program, it starts at 10, everybody should be there dot on time, right? And it so happened I was driving one development center, and Mumbai being Mumbai and traffic issues happened to a lot of people. A few people were late, and my directors were also in the room. And I still, being a little old school on that front, especially coming with a little training background, I ended up actually raking up that issue first thing in the morning. That folks, while today you have been late, but I would really appreciate that tomorrow we all hit in, 15 minutes in advance. And one of my directors actually pointed it back to me And he said, Mahesh, but what about the empathy angle? I mean, he really felt that I was not empathetic to their problems or something. So I think sometimes I would have probably got a lesson of a different thought process that day. So if I were to just remove the word taught, may not be taught, but I am sure you can definitely through demonstrated actions bring people on to speed with that. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's a tough one to say that, it cannot be taught overnight. And like he mentioned, it is experiential and there has to be a conscious keeper in and around. That is very important. And I'll just give you one example about my son. Okay, so when I practice certain spiritual activities at home, there are times when we go back to our regular nature. We go back to the human we were since childhood, right? But he turned out to be my conscious keeper to check on me, saying, this is not the behavior. If you are following certain philosophy in life, this is not the right behavior. So as HR leaders, we also have to work towards building leaders around us, being conscious keepers for them as well in terms of demonstrating the right behavior, being closer to the ground, listening. That is most important. How do we become empathetic if we don't listen? So you would see some leaders are really fond of speaking. They continuously speak and they don't want to listen to someone else. That's the first step of being empathetic, that at least the other person wants to be heard. Pause and listen. That's maybe the first step you can start when you have to teach people empathy.
I just want to add 2 bits to the question. I think it's a very valid question. See, I think we've got to look at it in the perspective of, if you look at any organization, the fundamental architecture is your culture, your values, and your leadership. So if you have that piece right, and that has to be robust and very strong. When I say values, it's not just putting on paper empathy, customer service, innovation, etc. Those values have to be measured, those values have to be evaluated, and people have to be rewarded and trained on that. So if empathy is a value in the organization, there are certain behaviors that people need to display towards empathy. And that has to come right from the top. Are the leaders empathetic? Do they listen? Are they really, ambassadors of customer service, innovation? So your fundamental blocks of your culture, values, leadership have to be robust and strong. If these are strong, then whatever values, whether it is humanity, whether it is customer service, whatever the organization decides that is values based on, based on its outlook, the business it is in, then these things follow through. Otherwise, it's nice, we have empathy as a value. It will be a nice board kept, hanging in the CEO's room, the MD's room, across, your training hall, and beyond that, there's nothing.
Hi. Can I ask a question? Here, at the back.
Yeah.
Yeah, hi. So, thank you very much. My name is Arvind. I represent a small company. I think one of the things that I've been meaning to ask since yesterday is this: most of you represent large companies, but how do you apply some of these principles to small ones? But that's not the question. The question is, it's all very good to speak about empathy in a theoretical sense, but at a practical level, it kind of seems to sometimes run contrary to other areas in which you need to either be careful or be empathetic. For instance, employee empathy vis-a-vis customer empathy. So if you end up having to resolve a customer issue which requires you to be tough on your employees, how do you balance those two situations? If you're very empathetic towards individual employees, how do you then build discipline in teams? And then the question of results and outcomes versus the cost of empathy. What should be the financial implication or cost of empathy? Because as somebody mentioned earlier, all of this adds up to cost. So how do you balance between cost, customer needs, as well as team discipline if you're going to keep empathy at the top of it all and look at it as individual instances?
So you managed to split the human aspect between customer and employee. So we were actually talking about more on human-centric empathy, right? So you cannot differentiate saying you have to be only empathetic towards customer and not towards employees. It can't be split between the two. So it's not one or the other or balancing in that manner, but if there's a culture of, customer centricity, it first has to begin with, human centricity, be it customer or employee is my take. So only focusing on customer is maybe a leader's view, and that's where the prioritization comes. So when you talk to a leader saying, what is his priority, when you speak to them one-on-one, they definitely say people are their priority. But when it comes to, stack ranking the priorities, always people comes somewhere, third, fourth or fifth. The first two is always value proposition for the customer, business growth. So that's where, what are we talking and what are we demonstrating, both makes a lot of difference.
I think I'd like to add very quickly, I think we're running out of time, but very quickly I just want to add, while Ishita rightly said that it's not about an either or. For sure, customer centricity for all of us is paramount, and we certainly give it above everything, right? But if the question is more, I think it's more related to if the employee who was serving that customer is in pain, how do you deal with it, right? Yeah, so I think right. No, so it does not say that you don't be empathetic to either or. You definitely be empathetic to both. But I am reminded of that geese story, when one of the geese, which is leading in the front, gets hurt, it takes the seat behind, and the one in the front comes in the, one from behind comes in the front to lead. So possibly it could be a time when others in the team need to rise to the occasion and add to the employee side of it. You definitely cannot compromise on the customer service. Because we have classic cases of people with bereavement in the family and coming to work because they had a commitment, So those are really hallmarks of examples. But I think we are running short, as well as I want to give Madhukar one message. Technology of AC in this room is very good, but they need to be a little more empathetic to a lot of people in the room. The stage is very chilled.
Actually,
maybe you kept it, you increased it.
No, sorry to interject. I was actually thinking it's a human experiment by the hotel to make people have a feel of Shimla and Goa. Yeah. Sitting right at the back, even I was shivering. But even in this.
Thank you to all the panelists, and thank you guys, were a good audience. Yeah.
Ishita, we have, sir wants to take a minute.
I just wanted to add to that question. I think it's a very brilliant question. See, just one perspective on this, because I face this in some of the organizations that I work with. For any value to get really embedded, and it has to go right down the line, there has to be a certain level of maturity as far as the behaviors around that value. So you need to, see, it's not just, so the organization has to think deep and say that, okay, when empathy has a value, these are the acceptable behaviors, non-acceptable behaviors. So when that gets translated down the line, it becomes a culture, a way of life in the organization. It's not just, so then you know how to behave with, with customer, how to behave with the employee, because, this gets embedded as a way of life, and that's how, and that's the only way that it will work.